Canadians rightly expect their governments to build an economy that fights climate change using the most effective tools at our disposal. And now we can get on with the job.
The carbon tax impacts our competitiveness and it hurts people on the margins the most. I think it's backwards, to be honest. So our approach will not have the taxation approach.
A federal price on carbon is legal. In a crucial 6-3 ruling, the Supreme Court of Canada concluded that the federal government has the constitutional right to apply minimum national standards on greenhouse gas emissions and a price on carbon, saying that climate change is a matter of national concern. Now, this is a big political victory for the Liberal Party and a big loss for Ontario, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, who fought this all the way to the top court. All right, so now what? The Conservative Party leader, Aaron O'Toole, says if he's elected, he'll kill the Liberals' carbon price altogether. He told me this past week that he won't impose a federal minimum standard either. So how will his party still meet their Paris Climate Accord targets that they say they're committed to doing? Remember, Thursday's court decision came after the Conservative Party's convention, where Mr. O'Toole declared the climate debate was over. Then delegates said, not so fast, and they voted against a resolution to put the phrase climate change is real in the Conservative platform. So what does it mean for that party's approach to climate change? We did ask the Conservative leader to join us. We also asked his deputy leader, Kenneth Bergen. They were unavailable, but the Conservative MP, Tim Uppal, is here, and he joins us now. Good to see you, Mr. Uppal. Your party hasn't revealed your climate plan yet, but in the wake of the Supreme Court decision, if you were elected, would your party use the federal power to enforce any national standards on greenhouse gas emissions or a price on carbon on the provinces?
Well, what we see from the court ruling is that climate change itself is important, and as Conservatives, we would have a comprehensive plan. So we would have a plan where we work with the provinces and work with industry to ensure that we're able to lower emissions, but also protect Canadian jobs as well. What the carbon tax does is really it hurts working Canadians. It hurts the poorest among us. So we would be able to lower emissions without hurting the average Canadian.
Okay. But what if they don't want to meet a minimum standard to reach the Paris Climate Accord? Like, if there's no enforcement, what incentive do the provinces have under a Conservative government to actually meet the targets that you say Canada will meet?
We can work with the provinces. We can, to talk about how we can encourage the provinces to make sure that we meet those targets.
But how do you encourage them without something?
You don't have to have a carbon tax that hurts Canadians and hurts Canadian jobs. There's other ways that we can do it, and we would work with the provinces to ensure that we have a good, strong environmental plan, but also protects Canadians' jobs. We need to be, especially with the economy coming out of this pandemic, we have to be competitive. And you cannot just have a plan like the carbon tax that actually hurts Canadian jobs and doesn't help the environment.
Okay, so you wouldn't have the enforcement mechanism. Let me just talk to you about saying, you've said, and Mr. O'Toole said, this is the carbon price and the tax on carbon hurts low-income workers. According to a February 2020 report by the Independent Parliamentary Budget Officer of Canada, he said actually that's factually wrong, that the poorest Canadians actually have a net gain because of the rebate that is part of the package. In the province that you're from, Alberta, the Parliamentary Budget Officer says the net gain for the poorest Albertans would be over $340. That's the data from an independent officer of Parliament. What data do you have that actually contradicts that says this actually hurts workers?
What I'm hearing from Canadians is that they're frustrated that they're paying more for gas. They're paying more to get to work. They're paying more from going from their homes in many suburbs, going to downtown to go to work or wherever they're working. And even now, Justin Trudeau is going to increase the cost of the carbon tax that would have cost Canadians more in the middle of a pandemic.
Okay, well let me just first, respectfully, you've said you have anecdotal evidence that people are frustrated by it. Anecdotes aren't data. The data from the Parliamentary Budget Officer actually says the rebate, which you haven't mentioned, actually gives people back more money. Now let's talk, so that's the data. It's not my data.
But there's many more people that are paying it than that are getting that rebate, right? So there is a better way of doing this than putting it on the backs of those hardworking Canadians.
Sir, respectfully,
we can work
the data,
without a carbon tax.
I'm just trying to debate the facts. The Parliamentary Budget Officer said 6 to 8 out of 10 Canadians are actually ahead. The only people that pay slightly more, about $200 more, are people who make more than $100,000. That's the data of an independent analysis from the Parliamentary Budget Officer which I know your party quotes. But let's talk about the other issue that you've mentioned, and Mr. O'Toole, is that businesses will leave. There's a flight of capital. British Columbia has had a carbon tax since 2008. They've been the fastest growing economy since then. What evidence do you have that there has been some kind of flight of capital due to carbon emissions, or due to the price on carbon?
It's not there is a problem with the carbon tax itself because it's costing companies more, and then they're passing on that cost to consumers. So it's a competitive issue. When you're dealing with, are they going to set up shop in Canada where it's going to cost you more, or are they going to set up shop maybe in the US where it costs them less?
I haven't seen the evidence that big emitters are going to leave, but your own party says your plan that you're talking about, which you haven't unveiled, but your leader says you are going to put a price on carbon for big emitters, the very people you're saying are leaving because of a price on carbon. So which is it? Are you worried that they're leaving, so you're going to take the price of carbon off the big emitters, or are you putting it on the big emitters? Because you're saying, frankly, two different things here.
No, we're not. What we're saying is that we would work with the provinces and with the industry to ensure that we are able to help them lower emissions, but also be able to stay in Canada and create jobs and maintain Canadian jobs. We want to make sure that we're fighting working with the environment, helping to and reducing emissions, but also getting our economy back on track. We can do both. You don't have to do one or the other.
So I'm just trying to understand this. I know the plan's not here yet, but you're saying the Conservative plan will not have a federal enforcement mechanism of minimum standards, will not have a price on carbon, will focus on big emitters. Sir, big emitters make up exactly 30% of Canada's overall greenhouse gas emissions. So you're saying your party can meet the Paris targets just enforcing emissions on 30% of our emissions? That's it? You can do that?
What we're saying is that we will kill the carbon tax. We won't have a tax on Canadians, and what we're saying is that we will work with the provinces and with industries to reduce their emissions. We can work with them and help them to reduce it even further. Like if you just look at even at the energy sector, the energy sector over the last number of years have actually reduced their carbon footprint.
Right.
We can work with them even more and help invest in technologies that does that.
When is this plan going to be revealed?
You will see our full environmental plan, which will be a very comprehensive plan, before the election.
Well,
and that election timing is up to Justin Trudeau, so who knows when that's going to be.
Okay, but I mean, if the election is after the federal budget, which is April 19th, I'm just saying, such a critical issue, will it be in the next month?
You're right.
So we could see this plan within the next month.
You will see this plan once we release it, but it will be a very comprehensive, conservative approach to reducing emissions, but also improving our economic situation, because that is our focus right now.
All right, I really appreciate you joining us, Mr. Uppal. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Evan. Good to join you.
Okay, let's get the federal government's perspective. Joining us now is the Environment Minister, Jonathan Wilkinson. Minister, good to have you back on the program. Let me just start with a decision. Obviously, it was a big day for your government. What is your reaction to the impact this Supreme Court decision will have?
Well, as you say, I think it was an important day. It kind of settled the legal wrangling that's been going on with respect to the price on pollution. That is a key part of our climate plan, but of course our climate plan is significantly broader than that. But I think what it does is it clears the path to be able to move forward to implement the work that has been done to ensure that Canada is going to meet and exceed its current Paris Agreement targets and do so in a manner that actually will promote economic prosperity and jobs for Canadians. Okay,
now you've heard some reaction from the three provinces and from the official opposition. I spoke to Erin O'Toole, I just spoke to Tim Uppal. The Conservatives have a couple questions. They say, first of all, they'll never use the power that the Supreme Court has granted to the federal government to set minimum standards on greenhouse gas emissions. They're going to simply rely on the provinces to come up with their own solutions and reach that goal. What do you make of that? Can they just say, look, the provinces will do it, we'll cooperate with them, we don't need an enforcement measure?
Well, I would just say that that's essentially a declaration by the Conservative Party that they're not serious about meeting the Paris Agreement targets. I mean, at the end of the day, you need a national plan. That's exactly what the Supreme Court said yesterday. This is an issue of national concern. And the federal government has to be willing to ensure that at a minimum, we are achieving the kinds of reductions we need to make the progress that Canada is committed to in the international community. If you're not willing to do that, if you're willing to simply throw up your hands and say, let the provinces do it, then they simply will be incapable of meeting the target.
Well, he says that he contends here we'll have a plan. We haven't seen the details that will meet the Paris Accord without the federal enforcement measure. And by the way, without a price on carbon. He says he's going to cancel the carbon tax, the carbon price, because he says, one, it hits the poorest Canadians the hardest, he contends. And he also contends that it's causing a big flight of capital, that industry are fleeing Canada to jurisdictions like the United States that don't have a price on carbon, and it's made us uncompetitive. What do you make of those two arguments?
Well, I would say a couple things. I mean, the first is I am getting increasingly tired of the federal Conservative Party simply making up facts. They can read the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report just like everybody else can. The majority of Canadian families are actually better off with the price on pollution, and that is particularly true for low and middle income people. So, I would encourage Aaron O'Toole to broaden his reading list and to actually look at the facts. That is just absolutely false that this targets poor people. In fact, as I say, poorer people are better off under the price than they would be if there was no price. In terms of industrial emissions, I mean, Aaron O'Toole says we need to price industrial emissions. We agree. We have industrial pricing systems across the country, but we structured them in a way that we actually incent them to perform to best in class, and we protect them from some of the trade issues in terms of carbon leakage. Now, if Aaron O'Toole wants to make it so that industrial emitters pay even more, the carbon leakage issue becomes more significant. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say that you're worried about carbon leakage and you're going to price industrial emissions even more than the current federal government is doing.
But is he right to say that industries might just go, okay, we're going to go over to the United States. They don't have a price on carbon. They don't even have emission intensity issues.
No, he's wrong. I mean, the way in which the industrial emissions piece is structured is to essentially protect and avoid carbon leakage, avoid companies actually moving for those kinds of reasons. But I would also say Aaron O'Toole should actually, understand that the Americans are moving very rapidly on climate change. If he would have a conversation with John Kerry or any of the other folks that are involved in the Biden administration, they are going to be extremely ambitious on climate, and it will be an interesting discussion and almost competition between Canada and the United States in terms of level of ambition. So, this kind of argument is just not true.
What do you expect provinces like Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Ontario to do now? What will your government actually accept? Because some of them are going to start, we're going to have a rebate at the gas pumps. They're going to have to develop their own provincial plans. What will your government accept and get rid of the backstop for?
Well, one of the things that we said when we released the climate plan in December was there was a need to strengthen the benchmark, the minimum standards that provinces and territories need to meet in order to have a provincial system in place instead of a federal system. We're discussing that right now with provinces and territories, and we intend to be able to put something forward in terms of what that will look like in the next couple of months.
Got to leave it there. Minister, always good to have you on the program. Appreciate it. Thanks.
No, not at all. Thank you.